Hello and good morning to everyone here in central New York on a kind of cloudy, rainy April day, although we've had some very good weather. It's been beautiful last week. It's gone cold again, but it's going to pick up again. Of course, this is typical April weather, but we're glad we're through the winter, and we've also come to the end of our book study course, Signs of Change. And it's been a very pleasant experience for me, and I hope others, to study this book together and to hear what the Word of God, the Bible, might mean for us in our time, and especially seeing it as a revelation of God's nonviolence. And we've had our faithful members here, Maggie, Kathy, Dana, Kat, and sometimes Heather, and Jerry, of course, yes, and I do believe that these recordings have gone out on YouTube, and so this will be the last of the recordings on YouTube from this study. So it's a kind of signing off and a farewell. And I know some people have followed the studies on YouTube, and that's a very useful and valuable outreach here of this message. So it's also a kind of signing off and a final class with all those who've followed us by that means as well. So today, and it's very appropriate that we're signing off, of course, with the book of Revelation. That's what we're doing. And I felt in the book, even though in the book that I wrote, the Signs of Change, that the major effort was to give a reading of nonviolence that was continuous through the Old Testament into the New Testament, into the persons and the teaching of Jesus and Paul. And I did that, but I thought if I didn't include something on the book of Revelation, it might fall flat at the last hurdle. In other words, I might fall flat on my face, or the book would fall flat on its face, because people would say, well, what about the book of Revelation and all the horrendous violence, apparent violence in that book? And that isn't it true, therefore, that even if we could agree that Jesus himself was nonviolent, he did not offer violence to anyone, still, nevertheless, at the end of the Bible, there is this picture of the end times, or whatever, however we read them, a vision of the world subjected to horrendous violence, of the plagues and the trumpets, and the great last battle between the rider on the white horse and the nations of the kings of the nations of the earth, in which everyone is slain except those on the side of the rider on the white horse. So everything ends up with this horrendous battle, or apparently, and so people will say, well, yes, there might be nonviolence. You might make the argument of nonviolence, especially in respect of Jesus, but in the end, there's going to be a final reckoning, and it's going to come in terms of horrific violence. And the way the world is, and the way the world continually terrifies us with its power and its kind of late in the day ability to unleash weapons of horrendous power to destroy everything, omnicide, we think, well, those two things converge, the picture in the Bible and the ability of the world to destroy itself. And so it must be true that violence is the end of everything. And so if I didn't include some pages on the book of Revelation, then I may not have concluded the argument of the nonviolent revelation of God in the Bible to everybody's satisfaction. And the argument would have a big hole in it. And so I had to try to ask persuade the publishers to allow me to put a few more pages, because the way they work is they have, the book has to be a certain size and it can't go beyond a certain size because otherwise it gets too expensive for them. That's the way they work. But still, they allowed me to get a few more pages in there, and that's how it is. I have just a few short pages on the book of Revelation, but enough, I hope, to make the point, the necessary point that I will be making now, that the book of Revelation is essentially about the nonviolence of the Lamb. And the hero of the book is the nonviolent Lamb, and the violence that goes on around the Lamb is the violence of the world in response to this revelation. But even that will be overcome at the end. And the last 2 or 3 chapters of the book seem to tell us and to show us an earth and a world turned completely to the peace of the Lamb, and not destroyed, and not overwhelmed by plagues and war and death. Suddenly there's this, it's like the end of the movie. You kind of wake up from the dream and you realize it's all a dream, and everything is peaceful and beautiful, and you embrace it really, after the horrors that you've seen. You embrace it with increased or much more profound willingness to go the way of the Lamb, to go the way of nonviolence. So really, that is the argument here, that the book of Revelation is essentially, it's not a testament of violence. It's not a manifesto of divine violence coming at the end. It's actually a book of irony. It has an ironic view of the world as it refuses this completely astonishing and revolutionary message of the nonviolence of the Lamb, which is a nonviolent way of being. It's a whole universe of nonviolence, and the world as we have it resists it, because it is, the world as it stands is based on violence. So essentially, in its very being, it's going to resist that. And so what looks like, what can seem the coming of a kind of heavenly violence to end everything, is actually, according to the argument that I make, it's a vision of the world's own violence unleashed upon itself, but happening because of its refusal of the message of the Lamb, of the nonviolent Lamb. And therefore, ironically, to the world, it looks like the Lamb is itself violent, because the world understands everything in terms of violence. And yet, the picture that is being presented is of the world blind to what is being revealed. So that all the time you've got to see that all this that is happening is the result of the refusal of the world, of this other way of being of the Lamb. And to some degree, you have to interpret the book to see it that way. Of course, the book itself has been open to all sorts of interpretations and still is. In some ways, it's quite a simple book. There isn't a great deal to it. It's almost like the visions repeat themselves. Some people build one set of visions on another and try to find a sequence there, and that might be interesting in itself. But I think it's more like a fever dream, like if you're sick, and you have a fever and stuff goes through your head, you are you can't really know what came before and what came afterwards, and whether you've seen the same thing over and over again, or you're in a repetitive state of kind of hallucination. And I think that is very much the character of the book of Revelation. It's a repeated hallucination of the world's violence. And the reason why you've got this at the end of the Bible, I mean, it's very interesting that you've got the Bible, the New Testament, should we say, with the Old Testament behind it, but the New Testament really, which is basically an historical presentation of the story of Jesus, and then the emergence of the church, and the letters of Paul, and a few other letters as well. So they're all rooted in that very first century experience of the emergence of Christianity. And suddenly you've got this other book right at the end, which kind of expands the horizons, so that you don't know which age you're in, and what has happened to time. And it can feel, and I think it does feel very much, that this is any time, and this is the present time. This is what's going on now. It's almost like the history book, kind of in quotes history, of the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles and the letters has been replaced by a modern newspaper, a contemporary newspaper. You're opening a contemporary newspaper full of the horrors of the world. And so what the effect of the book of Revelation, which I personally, as a reader of the Bible, I kind of welcome, is that rather than having a cutoff at the end of the letters, which all reflect the circumstances of the first century, you suddenly have this perspective, this shall we say, telescope, this optical instrument that looks out at the whole of history to come. It is like a telescope that sees the light coming from the past, but in the present, and possibly in the future as well. It compresses time into this kind of this single period or phase of the kind of unleashing of terminal violence. And that itself is concluded with this incredible image of peace, of the heavenly Jerusalem and God living with his people on earth. And there's no more violence, there's universal healing. So you've got this wonderful drama, of the time that comes after the revelation of the New Testament. So this really, the book of Revelation, you might call it, in quotes, Christian time. It's the time affected by the gospel. And for many reasons, when we've talked about it, that in the past, how the gospels and the revelation of the victim in Jesus has profoundly influenced the time that we're in. And that's the whole argument of René Girard, which we've returned to a number of points. But the book of Revelation kind of underlines that all time now is compressed into this single terminal moment where the violence of the world rages against this revelation of a non-violent way of being. And that is the character of all time. I mean, I think that's what the book of Revelation is showing us. That is the character of all time, all historical time, after the revelation of the Gospels, the revelation of the Son of God, of Jesus, as being the non-violent one, the non-violent Son of Man, and crucified and risen. So all time is deeply impacted and kind of compressed up against that truth, so that it can't escape it. It can't keep on going over and over and over the same old ground that it did before, with one empire succeeding on another, one war succeeding on another. Everything is kind of made much more absolute and much more terminal. And that is very much where we find ourselves today in the 21st century, with the enormous power of the weapons, the power of the weaponry that we have to destroy the earth, plus the impact that we're having on the earth anyway, just the amount of people and the global warming caused by all the industries and our way of life, the way we consume the energy, the amount of energy that we demand to live the way we do. It seems like that we are very much at this moment where the book of Revelation it is really truly our time. Go ahead, Maggie.
As you were talking about this, I felt like all of a sudden, I feel like I kind of understand it all of a sudden, because I
Oh,
feel
good.
like well, I could be totally wrong. You're going to tell me. I feel like the Gospels were, it's like the data information on how to fix ourselves.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever seen the movie War Games
Yes,
with
I think
Matthew Broderick?
yeah.
And the computer takes over, and now all of a sudden there's a nuclear threat and we're going to kill
Yeah.
each other. So the with the tic-tac-toe information, so like the tic-tac-toe information is like our Gospels. And
Right.
so the world now is taking all of that information, processing it, and figuring out that when they see this violence in Revelation, we're going through this process of figuring out that violence is not the way.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, humans don't seem to realize that till they put violence upon themselves.
Yeah.
And they then realize that this is not going to work. And then they all of a sudden see that the answer is the peace of the Lamb.
I think that's very good, Maggie. I think that is very much the situation. That is the picture of the book of Revelation, and it's the situation we're in today. I think those two things are the case, that we're in this moment of kind of urgency and crisis, because the mechanisms of war, and as you say, very pointedly, of artificial intelligence, you know, the threat that it can unleash this war on us, whether we like it or not. But it's something that we have built, and we built throughout. The reason why we have these great computer machines is so that we could be smarter and quicker than our enemies. Essentially, that's why we have them. So, you know, that's another of the intensification issues that I think the book of Revelation, it is a series of intensifications, like in a fever dream, you know, as it approaches its crisis, your mind goes crazier and crazier, really. And I think that's why you have these repetitive motifs. It has that kind of like dreamlike structure where things are getting more and more intense. And as you say, exactly, it fits the time that we're in. And
Yeah, the
so
gun violence is crazy right now. It's like we're,
you mean in the US? Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and more protests. The younger kids are starting to protest against the gun violence. So
Right.
we're trying to work it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Guns in schools now is, it's like another one of those really bad dreams that you could think, well, that could never have happened. That should never happen. But it's you're now seeing these kids or people or people who once were kids in those schools going in and destroying the whole place with an automatic weapon that kills tens, 20s of people within seconds. So yeah, we are in this immense crisis, and I think the book of Revelation is a very, very apt book for that crisis.
Mhm.
And that's why I think it's good. I personally think it's good that the book of the Christian Bible finishes with the last book in the Christian Bible is the book of Revelation. I think it's very appropriate that it is there and that it has that picture. So now, just to get into more detail about this, let's look at some of the. I mean, we're not going to study the whole thing and go through every one of the chapters. We don't have time for that. There's lots of interesting things in it, but the first thing to know is that the first 3 chapters of the book, as you probably all know, consist of the letters to the 7 churches. So the first 3 books are the letters to the 7 churches, the Church of Ephesus, Smyrna, Philadelphia, that kind of thing. And they're all churches on the western side, the western coastline of Turkey, modern day Turkey, Asia Minor, the Aegean, and they were obviously churches of considerable importance because they probably had grown from the time they were evangelized through Paul or through companions of Paul or at the time of Paul. They are representative churches of Christianity, and so these letters are sent to these churches by through the revelation of Jesus to the visionary, the person named John, who saw Jesus and took his words and passed them on to the churches. Now, it's very interesting that those churches, 3 of them, we know, and this is very relevant, 3 of them are known for their cult, their historical cult of the emperor. So the Roman emperor of the time, beginning, I think, even with Julius Caesar, I think it was after his death, but certainly Augustus Caesar and after him, had temples and priests in the cities of Smyrna, Ephesus, and Pergamum. They're all part of those 7 churches. And so the experience of the churches that the writer is writing to is of this supreme figure, the emperor, who is a figure in whom all the violence of the Roman Empire is concentrated, because he has the power of the legions, of the armies. He has all the power of Rome. And he is worshipped in these settings as a god. And so you have a kind of an alternative divinity, or as we could say, transcendence, what is of supreme importance. We've already got that presented in those 7 letters. And you can see, if you go to chapter 2, verse 13, if someone would like to read that, he's the angel, the message is to the angel that is the guiding spirit of the church in Smyrna, and this is what the message is. So if someone would like to read verse 13, if someone has it there. Go ahead, Maggie.
I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. You hold fast my name, and you did not deny my faith, even in the days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who has killed among you, where Satan dwells.
Okay, so there's the record of a Christian by the name of Antipas who was executed or killed, however, we don't know, in the city of Smyrna. And Smyrna is the place where Satan dwells, and Satan has his throne. So we know that in the book of Revelation, thrones are very important. We'll see that as we go ahead, that the throne, there are visions where there is a throne, the throne of God, and the Lamb is then introduced to that throne. But here there's an alternative throne, and it's the throne of Satan. And it could very well be that this is not just, you know, random, vague rhetoric. They're actually referring to the civic worship of the emperor, and the emperor is kind of enthroned in the city. And if you refuse that worship, one thing can lead, if you can get away without doing it and not being noticed, but you easily imagine if there's a public event and you refuse, and you're challenged to be part of it and you refuse, then that one, you can very easily be presented as a traitor, as a terrorist, as somebody who's an enemy to the state, and you'll end up dead. And that seems to be pretty much very credible, that this is a significant element in the background to the book of Revelation, that you've got people who are Christians who are under a lot of cultural and social pressure because of the rule of imperial violence, not just in the fact that there are armies, but that it's a way of being, it's a way of thinking and living that's celebrated in the worship of the emperor and in the worship of all things Roman, which is this imperial force in the world at the time. So in some way you have to understand the book of Revelation, you have to enter into this drama of Christians, people like you and me, but 2,000 years ago, living in a world that doesn't have a church across the road, doesn't have a bishop, somewhere or other, doesn't have a pope, or all these people that we're used to, doesn't have pastors. They're just these little communities, and then you have this massive cultural power and force of Roman militarism, violence, and its sense of glory about itself. It's the way of being is the Roman way of being. So that is a spiritual oppression, and it can end up also as a physical oppression, that you're going to get killed, and that your friends and relatives are going to get killed, or that you're not going to be able to do business. That's something else that we could investigate, is that in order to do business, to trade, for example, out of those ports, the seaports that are linked to those towns, you would have to engage in some form in this emperor worship. In other words, to get, I've seen it argued that to get your ship leave the harbor with the goods that you want to trade in, you first have to participate in some little, it'll take you 10 minutes. It'll be a very little thing. Just come up here and offer some incense, and there's a statue of the emperor or whatever there. Do that and you're good to go. Well, a Christian can't do that. And not at that time. And Christians are able, to bend their consciences in all sorts of ways. And sometimes maybe it is right to hide and to cloak yourself a little bit in order to survive. But, often they'd say, no, I can't do that. I just cannot do that because my Lord is Jesus. And then they'll say, well, you can't trade. Your boat will not leave the harbor. That's with its goods. And so you'll be reduced to poverty. So you've got to imagine that the situation, one way or the other, is of very powerful social and cultural oppression experienced by these Christians, these early Christians in the first century. And so the writer writes the visions and these terrible images that we're going to look at briefly, in order to push back. This is a book of pushing back. There's no doubt about it. It's saying, well, the newspaper is not telling you the whole truth. You might think that the emperor is all powerful and all victorious, but his kingdom is coming to an end. because it cannot stand. I mean, that's the internal message of the book, is that the kingdom of violence cannot stand. And one reason why the kingdom of violence cannot stand is because violence is repetitive and is always going to eat itself in some way. But also because once, and this is the much more important point, is that the Lamb has been introduced to human experience in history, and therefore makes the kingdoms of violence that much more intolerable. Because we now know, because of the Lamb, that there is another way, and Christians know that. And so the writer wants to show the people who are suffering this oppression, do not be crushed by this, because the truth that I see and that I'm sharing with you is that the very fact of the Lamb means to say this empire that you're suffering under is going to collapse. It cannot stand. It will fall, and it will fall with quite a terrible crash. So that sense of the terrible crash in the book of Revelation is always a kind of like, there is this sense of encouragement. You know, when the police come to your door, the soldiers come to your door, and they drag you off, and they beat you up, or they kill you on the spot, you feel absolutely powerless. Of course you feel powerless, and you feel that your human meaning is destroyed. But if you get someone like this prophet, this visionary, who sees this and says, well, no, that is only one fraction of the story. You have to see the rest. That sense of all this crashing down, even though you're suffering from it at the moment, it's going to come crashing down. That is going to give you a lot of strength and encouragement. But that is still only half the story, because it is not crashing down for the sake of you having revenge on it, because that would then return you again to the same way of being and the way of seeing the world as the violent Roman Empire. Is coming crashing down so that there will be another way of being on earth, and that the kings of the nations will bring all their wealth into the city of God, and the leaves on the trees of the two trees that are on either side of the city of the river of life in this city of God will be for the healing of the nations. So even though it's crashing down and it feels pretty terrible, it is for the sake of an ultimate healing that this is happening, so that you will awake. The world will awaken from its fever dream and become the earth of peace and blessing that God always intended, right from chapter 1 of Genesis. So actually, it's very, very appropriate that the whole arc of the Bible finishes with like chapter 1 and 2 of Genesis, which is of the creation of everything good, and then humanity emerging in a garden. It will end up in a city, but like a garden city that has a river and trees in it, and the project of life that the beginning of Genesis sets out is fulfilled there right at the end of the book of Revelation. So there's a tremendous kind of symmetry and coherence in it all. So that's the first three chapters are the letters to the suffering churches. And then, and it's important to know this, the whole thing cuts, the writing cuts from the letters to a vision of heaven. So in chapter 4, at the beginning there, verse 1, it says, after this I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open, and the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this. So right now, you're beginning to you're beginning to get this vision that is going to make sense of all this, and you see it in terms of heaven, and so you're getting a vision from this absolutely privileged perspective of heaven itself, where all is true and real, and all everything that's going to happen is fully revealed. And so he goes to heaven, and he takes the visionary takes part or is a witness of a heavenly liturgy, and there's a throne there, and it's a very beautiful throne, and one seated on the throne, and then there are 24 elders dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads, and coming from the throne are flashes of lightning. So I'm reading here in verses 4 and 5. And rumblings and peals of thunder, and in front of the throne burns 7 flaming torches, and these are the 7 spirits of God. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures. So you've got this beautiful, this very dazzling and impressive scene of God's throne and the elders, the 24 elders, which presumably consist of the elders representing the 12 tribes of Israel, and then a corresponding 12 elders representing, it's one way of understanding it, representing the leadership or the communities of Christianity, whatever. There's 24 elders there. They surround, and then there's the 4 living creatures, which repeat some of the vision of Ezekiel. So you have these themes and these visions, and the creatures worship God, saying, "Holy, holy, holy, the Lord God, the Almighty, who was and who is to come." And they give glory and worship, and the elders give worship. They fall down and worship. So it's like going to a very high liturgy in the Catholic Church or the Episcopal Church, and like there's the music, the choir, the procession and everything, but this is taking place. This is not just the representation. This is the real thing in heaven. Then suddenly, beginning in chapter 5, verse 1, then I saw in the right hand of the one seated on the throne. So this is God, in God's right hand, a scroll written on the inside, on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" So now you shift from this liturgy to a drama, an exciting event where God himself on the throne is holding up this scroll sealed 7 times over. In other words, it's stuck together with wax or whatever 7 times. And the voice says, "Who is worthy to open the scroll?" Now, just let's pause there. Why would God be holding up a scroll? I mean, first of all, what is a scroll? What is what is this? Roll it up.
It's can it be a contract, a paper of?
Yes, that's exactly right. It's a piece of writing it's a piece of paper with writing on it. That could be a contract. It could be an account narrative. It's definitely made up of words and of the communication of words. So we hear immediately, or we see in the drama, that words and their communication and the meaning that words give is one of the central elements of the drama. God is holding this up. Now, it also has to be opened up. You've got this book. Who's going to open the book for us? And nobody can open the book. And I began to weep because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. So who's going to read this book? Who's going to read this book for us? That is the book that God is kind of basically offering. And then I saw between, so in verse 6 here, verse 5, chapter 5, verse 6, then I saw between the throne and the four living creatures, and among the elders, a lamb standing as if it had been slaughtered, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, and which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of the one who was seated on the throne. When he had taken the scroll, and the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell before the Lamb, each holding a harp, and they sang, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals." So suddenly we have this book with writing in it, and therefore meaning, which no one can open except the Lamb standing there as one who had been slaughtered. So when we say, when the writing of the book of Revelation says a lamb standing there as one who had been slaughtered, what does that say? What does that phrase itself say? Standing as one who had been slaughtered.
Well, it says it refers to Jesus, right?
Our minds immediately go to Jesus, and of course,
Right.
yes.
Just thinking about who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be nonviolent in that statement.
Right. Now, so the lamb standing as one has. So, like, just forgive me, I stand up. If I stand up because I want to draw attention to myself. Look at me, right? I stand up. So the lamb is saying, "Look at me," basically. And when you look at the lamb, you see that it has been slaughtered, and it's not that it is that it's been slaughtered in the past, but it's being slaughtered is also present, because that's what's noticeable about it, is the lamb that stands is one as having been slaughtered. It's like it's almost just been slaughtered, and yet it's standing. So what the image presents is of this animal, which is of course a weak and non-violent animal, the lamb. That is why they're chosen as sacrificial creatures, because they're totally unable to retaliate, and therefore they're very appropriate in sacrificial terms for all the violence to go into them, because there's no retaliation, there's no mirroring back of violence. So this lamb, this non-violent lamb, presents to you, presents to the vision, to those looking, the fact that it's being killed. So suddenly, rather than killing the lamb in the temple and good, done and dusted, I've got rid of my sins, or we then eat, if it's a communion sacrifice, I eat some of it, I feel good. No, this is held up to you as having been slaughtered. You can't avoid the picture. What does that say? That's the key of the book, that this lamb as having been slaughtered is mentioned, I think, 28 times. That is the key thematic of the book. Well, the lamb is mentioned. I don't think it's the phrase having been slaughtered is there every time, but it's there quite a few times. So that's the key image of the book. This lamb standing up, drawing attention to itself as having been killed. What does that suggest to you? Go ahead, Maggie.
That to me, it says that, we face our violence, but there's hope in the change because the lamb is now standing.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And didn't take violence upon us who slaughtered it.
That's exactly right. That's it, right. So it's an amazing thing, because it's like looking in a mirror, kind of thing. You did this. This is you. And in that very moment, there's the possibility of you, exactly as you say, Maggie, of you saying, "Oh my God." It's like the ghost in Hamlet, you know, they, like in any kind of dramatic presentation, the image of someone bloodied and been murdered and comes back. Oh my God, they come back to get their revenge, and which is what Hamlet is all about. So you could feel the lamb is there to get revenge, or you could feel what Maggie just said. Well, thank God it's not taking revenge on me. It's actually forgiving me. Doesn't hold me. It's doesn't hold my violence against me to retaliate against me with more violence, but with forgiveness. And therefore I become one of the people of the Lamb, one of the children of the Lamb, and join the Lamb's way of being in the world. Or, and it could take a split second, or I can think, oh my God, this lamb is going to come to get me, or it's going to come to get all the bad guys who did it. You know, you can have one or two reactions. And I think that's what the book is about, is that it depends on how you react to this offer of another way of being in the world that the lamb represents. If you're still in the violent world, then you think, well, this is definitely going to be about the lamb getting his own back. But if you see the lamb as known as just having been slain, but without retaliation, then obviously you're in. It takes a split second, but you're in this other world that the lamb represents. So
Love,
that is
right?
what. Sorry.
If you look at it that way, you're in a world of love.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
And that gives us the hope. Yeah.
It gives us totally hope. And so this lamb is at the interface of the world of love and of the world of violence. And it's like the portal between the two. You can choose what to go through, or you can back off into the world of violence and say, there's no other way of being. We are a violent world. We are violent, and someone's going to get punished for it. And if I just tick my box and say I'm with the lamb, then it won't be me. But no, you have to go through. It's not a matter of just ticking the box and saying the lamb has shed his blood for me. No, you have to go into the lamb's way of being to be with the lamb. And so I mean, that's all compressed in a very small image. But the lamb is able to open the scroll when nobody else was able to open it. But that tells you that all the writing and the meaning, that the God is holding the scroll up. So there has to be some profound meaning in it. Communication.
Right before that, verse 5 there. Then one of the elders said to me, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, that's the one that's empowered. Well, they're saying, hey, we've got a strong lion that's going to come and do it. But then the next verse, it says, no, it's a lamb. It's a lamb that was slaughtered. And so right there, you've got another key to what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely, Jerry. I mean, that kind of seamless transition from a lion to a lamb. You know, there's the line of the root of David, of the tribe of Judah, and the root of David. You know, and then you go straight to the lamb as having been slaughtered. You know, his slaughtering is a contemporary truth. Is right there before you. That is the key, what you might call semiotics, the way the words, the language, the images change your meaning. You know, you're shifting from a lion with his teeth and his claws, who will have revenge on his enemies, to a lamb who did not retaliate and was slaughtered. Go ahead. Thank you, Jerry.
Doesn't it also, like, I feel like it's telling us, the lamb, that in order for us to transform into this loving, non-revengeful person, we definitely have to recognize our violence.
Yes, absolutely.
We have to be able to, we have to understand that we have violence within us in order to get rid of it.
Right, absolutely. That's the whole, that's it. You see, because what's the point of having the lamb stand up in front of you as having been slaughtered, unless it's showing you something? I mean, it really is the content of the scrolls. The lamb is able to open the scrolls because it already shows you what's actually in the scrolls, which is the violence, the revelation of human violence. You know, I mean, I think that would be a reasonable interpretation of what's in the scroll, which no one can open. That humanity is constituted by violence, and that the lamb offers another way. And the lamb standing like that, as you say, Maggie, shows you that, yeah, this is what you've done. But don't be worried, don't be frightened, don't be worried, because that is being shown to you so that you can be this other way, which is the way of the lamb. The two things go together. You see and you be, all in one. And then the lamb gets up, and then there's this hymn of praise naturally to the lamb, and he makes saints from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you made them a kingdom of priests. And then it shifts up. So there's the liturgy. Then there's a liturgy. There's the revelation of the scroll, the lamb who opens the scroll. Then there's a little bit more liturgy of worship and thanksgiving. And then at the beginning of chapter 6, then what happens next? So if someone would read chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. If someone would like to read that, chapter 6, verses 1 through 8.
Then I saw the Lamb upon one of the 7 seals.
Open. Yeah, go on.
Okay. And I heard one of the 4 living creatures call out, as with a voice of thunder, "Come." I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider had a bow. A crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. And when he opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature call out, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take the peace from the earth so that people would slaughter one another. And he was given a great sword. When he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature call out, "Come." I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's pay, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay. But do not damage the olive oil and the wine." And when he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature call out, "Come." And I looked, and there was a pale green horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed with him. They were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill with sword, famine, and pestilence by the wild animals of the earth.
Okay, right. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you for reading that. And so expressively, thank you. Okay, so the lamb, who is non-violent, opens the seals, and the first 4 seals are conquest or empire, call it empire, war, by which empire is established, famine, which can come naturally but can also result from war because there's not been sowing and harvesting, and just death itself. Now, why should the first 4 things that come out of the scroll that are shown to us, why should they be those 4 terrifying things. Now remember that people have seen this as this is what God is doing. Because it's the Lamb opening the scroll, God is sending empire, war, famine, and death out into the world. But is that really what's happening?
This is really a description of what is taking place because of the violence in the world.
Exactly,
And,
Jerry.
War, they're all summed up in war: conquest, violence, famine, death. These are all things that happen because of the wars and violence that take place in the world. That there's no indication here that God is doing these. At least I don't see it. But
no, absolutely right. So what we have here, and I think that this is critical and crucial for anybody following this text here that we're looking at, is that what the scroll does, and the Lamb opening the scroll, is reveal these things to us. In the past, they obviously existed before the scroll was opened. Obviously, there was war, and there was empire, and there was famine and death. But what now is happening is because there is another way of life, another way of being, which is promised by the Lamb. We can see these things for what they really are. They are these terrifying things of empire, war, famine, things that don't have to be. So what we're having here with the Lamb is the revelation of violence, not its release. It's already released in the world, but people have taken it for granted, and they still do. But what the Lamb does is reveal these things for what they are. So you suddenly see them for the terrifying and anti-human reality that they are. These are monsters that don't belong to God's plan. And they are being revealed by the Lamb as such. Only the Lamb can reveal them in that way. Oh, I can see them now for what they are. They don't have that Roman emperor down the road in his temple. It doesn't have to be that way. There's no temples in the city of God, only the Lamb. It doesn't have to be the way of Roman Empire and war. So this is a highly subversive moment in the book. It's showing that the way of Rome and the way of all the empires of the earth are not necessary, not essential, and in fact they belong to a doomed way on earth, and the way of the Lamb is the true way. So this, if you read that and you hear it, what is its effect going to be on you?
It seems to me again that this is a second way. You know, first we see the slaughtered lamb, and then having the scrolls open and this information now being read,
Right,
is another eye-opening that this is what's happening now.
yep.
So now we understand what's happening around us.
And
So
what
our
is it?
eyes are opened again.
Right, and what is that effect on you?
It wants me to, well, first there's sadness,
Yeah.
but then it's wanting it to change, wanting
Yes.
new things to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Dana?
It gives me hope, actually, the way you're presenting it, because it's like, oh, right, this is happening, but something's going to shift from that. Like, so when
Right,
you look around you and you see all this violence repeating itself,
right. That's
it-
exactly right. Because the Lamb, it's like here in the United States to prosecute somebody, you might have a what do you call it? Anyway, there's an indictment made, and it's a sealed indictment. If there's a sealed indictment against you, you don't know really what's in it. But the indictment is no longer sealed. We now know what's in it. And we also, exactly as you say, Dana, we know how to deal with it. And Maggie, that we know. So we know the defense. We have the indictment against us, against humanity, those 4 terrible enemies. And we have the defense against them, so it's incredibly encouraging. Now, this indictment is no longer a mystery that's hanging over us that's going to destroy us. Oh, we see clearly what this is. And our eyes are open, so we're no longer as stupid as we were, because we took all these things as necessary, as destined, as a fate that we could not avoid. But that is not the case anymore. There's this alternative way of life. So of course,
now we know what we need to change. Now we know what we need to change.
Right, exactly right. Now, what shows this is the case is the fifth seal is unleashed. Because once the revelation is made, and once, like you say, Maggie, we know what we need to change, what is the world going to do in response to you? Dana?
I think are we gonna be slain?
Yeah, that's right. It's gonna come at you. It's gonna try and shut you up.
Yeah. This is what.
And so the fifth seal is. Would you like to read the fifth seal there? Sorry, we'll read it, Dana.
Okay.
Go on.
Number 8. Okay. Yes.
Verse 9.
Verse 9.
Yeah.
Then he opened the 5th seal. I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on these who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer, until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were was complete.
Right.
I looked. Is that it?
That's it. Thank you. Thank you. So what you've got there is the community of the slain, of those Christians who, one way or the other, had fallen foul of the authorities or the mob or whoever, and being killed. And they're calling out, how long is this going to go on for, that the world is going to continue the way it is, and that our non-violent deaths with the Lamb are not vindicated. And when it says avenge, that immediately can pop into people's minds. So you've always got this thing that you can flip over and to say, yeah, we're going to burn those guys. We're going to burn the Romans, or that their way of being in the world is going to be shown to be the only true way of being to the world, and the way of the violent is going to necessarily collapse and lose its power. And that is the judgment and the vindication that those souls are looking forward to, that the system that killed them is going to collapse, and the way of the Lamb is going to take its place. So it's natural that once you've revealed those enemies of humankind, empire, war, famine, and death, that those who've been killed for the sake of witnessing to another way will then get their voice and say, well, how long do we have to put up with this? Is it, well, just a little bit while longer, while this works its way out, and then the victory of the Lamb and of your death and the meaningfulness of your death will be revealed. So the fact that you put those the souls of the slain in there at that point shows that this is all from the perspective of the Lamb. This is not just the natural, inevitable sequence of human history or a kind of revenge. This is from the perspective of those who opt for the way of the Lamb, that there is a struggle here between the way of the Lamb and the way of the violent world of Satan, of the beast, as is later on described in the book. So that is a kind of go ahead, Jerry. Go on.
This is also in miniature the theme of the whole Bible, which is that how the people cry out, how long, how long? That's the cry of the Psalms. That's the cry of
that's right.
The victim. And the answer is always wait. A little while longer, wait. And that's the message here, I think. And it's all the way through the Bible. How long? It's what we're saying today. How long? And the answer is wait. And the cry that Revelation ends with is, come quickly, Lord. And the answer is, I'm coming. And I think there's a wait there too.
So actually, now thank you, Jerry, having seen it from that perspective, and as you say, in miniature, that is a kind of snapshot of the whole book. What we've seen is there's nothing else in the book except that struggle. That's what the book is about. It's the struggle between the Lamb and the revelation of the Lamb and the violent powers of this world, which retaliate, but are in the act of retaliating, are shown up to be what they are. This is no longer Homer's Iliad. You know, if you think about Homer, who wrote the story of the attack on Troy by the Greeks back in the 8th century, 8 centuries before this, it was just the way of the world and the way of the gods. Now, the way of the world and the way of the gods is no longer necessary. That there's another way. And in fact, because this other way has been revealed, the choice of the world gets really much narrower and much more urgent and critical. Because when you think of things as just, well, the way they are, then there's a little bit more, well, you know, whoever is in charge is always going to be somebody in charge. We just accept it. But when this alternative is introduced to the world, it shakes everything up. And the world can't quite be so easy with itself as before. That's why it's saying, wait. It's saying, I've told you, I've set in motion something that is not going to stop, and that is going to produce its result ultimately. So you're not waiting just for the sake of waiting. There is a mechanism and a dynamic at work which is going to bring about this final vindication of the Lamb. So I just want to. We have 15 minutes left. I want to read some passages from the end there. But what do you think? What do you think of that as an interpretation of the Book of Revelation? I mean,
Tony, I think you better get to that last battle.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. So, let's go to chapter 19, verses 11 through to 16. If someone would read that. So we've fast forwarded through a lot of stuff, which is the trumpets and the burning censers unleashed on the earth, the beast and the call to come out of Babylon, which is Rome, is to come away from it. Don't participate in it. All that we fast forwarded, and now we've got to the final battle. So if someone would read that, the final battle, chapter thank you, Maggie, 19:11 through to 16.
Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. He who sat upon it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and
Diadem.
diadems,
Yep.
and he has a name inscribed which no one knows but himself. He is clad in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, followed him on white horse. From his mouth issues a sharp sword with which to smite the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the wine press of the fury of the wrath of God the mighty, Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh, he has a name inscribed, King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
So this is the favorite passage where, of course, in the final battle, that then all hell is unleashed basically from heaven. That the rider on the white horse is now really means business and is not messing around, and the time for his vengeance has come. But is that what this text is really telling us? It's amazing that we have a rider on the white horse when right at the beginning there in chapter 6 we said the first thing, the first seal was a rider on the white horse, which was empire and victory. But now the rider, the name of the rider is the Word of God. And the Word of God and the sword that comes out of the rider's mouth, obviously the sword that comes out of the mouth is the tongue, and the words that are shaped by the tongue, the meaning that is shaped by the tongue. This is what is cutting down the nations and the kings of the nations, striking down the nations. So what we have is violent imagery containing non-violence. And the reason why it is expressed in violent imagery is because this is the language of the world. What this is the ironic reversal that I say that the book of Revelation uses, that it uses the vision of the world in order to push back against the world itself with the opposite tools or weapons even of the world. With the world's weapons are those of violence. These are the weapons of the word, of communication, the scroll, the meaning of the scroll opened by the Lamb, the non-violent Lamb, etc. You have to put them all together. So what you have is this final this battle, this final battle, which is waged against the nations, that looks like violence, and in some ways it is violent because the world pushes back in terms of violence, and so is experienced as violence, and the world experiences it as violence. But the moment you, as we said with Maggie earlier on, the moment you see the Lamb as the truth and you go through into that world of love that the Lamb represents, then of course it's no longer violence, and the following chapters show us that. But what just well, I'll go straight through the following chapter, and then we can all comment on it. There's the 1,000 years, which that has to be interpreted in itself, and I think it's really to do with the transformation of the earth. 1,000 years is a period of human history, so we're talking about the transformation of the earth, but we can't go into that into detail. But if we read chapter 21, verses 1 to 5, if someone would do that, and then
What chapter are you talking about?
I'm talking about chapter 21, verses 1 through 5, and then carrying on 22 to 22:5. So it's not as much as it sounds. So if you start with 21, 1 through 5, Jerry, if you would do that, we're good.
And a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Also, he said, "Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true."
Okay, thank you. So you can stop there and then cut to verse 22, going through to 22, chapter 22, 5. You go to verse 22 of chapter 21, and carry on through chapter 22, verse 5.
Oh, 21, verse 22. Oh, I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God is its light, and the lamp is the Lamb. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. The gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. People will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations, but nothing unclean shall enter it, nor anyone who practices abominations or falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Shall I go on?
Carry on, chapter 22, verse through to verse 5, please.
Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb. Flowing through the middle of the street of the city. On either side of the river is the tree of life, with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. Nothing accursed will be found there anymore, but the throne of God and the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads, and there will be no more night. They need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever.
Well, thank you very much. That's
Ever and ever, amen.
right. So, and it goes on, say some more stuff, but that's enough. So you've got this incredible battle, and then once the battle is of the words is concluded, heaven comes to earth. Then I saw the new Jerusalem dressed as a bride for a bridegroom coming to earth, and then God comes with it and dwells with his people on earth. And there's this city which is described as beautiful city, and there is no temple in the city, for God and the Lamb of the light are the temple, and you don't need a temple when they're there in the city. And the nations will walk by its light. So the nations are just being killed in the final battle, but now suddenly they're walking by its light. And the kings of the earth who fought for their glory, they bring their glory into the city. And the trees in the city of the tree of life, which is actually in two halves on either side of the river, the leaves of these trees are for the healing of the nations. So what was before destroyed in the battle is now healed and given life and light. And the kings who represented the force of violence within the nations, they surrender their glory to the city of the Lamb that was standing as one who had been slaughtered.
There's an image of a city here, of course, but with the trees there, you can also see it as an image as a garden.
Right.
I like to see this as a bookend. It started in the garden of
Eden.
Eden, and the lamb is slain in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he is raised in that garden. He's mistaken for the gardener by Mary, and there in the final blow, final scene, he's there. There's a garden there that has been created by the lamb that was slain.
That's very beautiful, Jerry. Absolutely. So, in summary, is it possible really to have a vengeful, vindictive, violent interpretation of the book of Revelation?
Well, yes, it's possible because people have been doing it for years and years and years. So, but is that the only possible interpretation? And yet you've just reminded us of the other interpretation that I think is more true to the overreaching vision of the gospel of the Bible.
Dana, thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, I think absolutely not. So black and white, but absolutely not. I just had to say that. No, you cannot. It makes absolutely no sense to interpret it as violent when you really consider the whole story.
That's right. When you start reading between the lines and you put one thing together with another, it's kind of like sarcasm in a way, like all the violent stuff. It's not real. It's as if this is the way you see things, this is the way it is for you. But this is what the Lamb is doing. Kathy.
Well, Tony, I choose your interpretation. If you ever want to entice someone into Christianity, don't ever let them see the book of Revelation the way it normally is interpreted. And I think, Tony, you are just too smart for the average Christian. And I think that you really take upon yourself as doing workshops on Revelations.
Well, I'm not too smart for the average Christian. It's the average Christian has been educated in a certain way. If you have to, it's difficult to re-educate. It's difficult. I've been formed in a certain way. My mind is formed in a certain way. That's the way I think. You have to get into a certain thinking and say, actually, you need to think in a different way. But how can a certain thinking think in a different way from the way it's thinking? So it's hard to do it. It's just my path in life. And by the way, my life story is coming out fairly soon. So I'll give it a little push for that. It's called Unbecoming a Priest, and that's going. If you want to understand how I got to be, in your words, too smart for the average Christian, I got to think differently from the average Christian. That memoir tells that story. But anyway, the point is that it's a labor. It's a hard work, and I value someone like Dana, who's never ever thought that other way. Now, there has to be reasons why she and her sister Heather did not think the old way. There has to be reasons, and we haven't. But the point is, a lot of people are like them as well, and so they just give up on Christianity. They say, "Well, Christianity is too awful, too horrible and violent to have." So you have to and the language of the book of Revelation can appear to give comfort to that way of looking at things. But once you read the language, the way language can be read, it can be read ironically and sarcastically, and you can tell a certain story, say, well, that's the story that you want to hear, but is that the real story? the non-violence of the Lamb, standing as one who's been slain. That is the real story. And once you understand that, then you can get to that last chapter, those last two chapters, and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. All the nations come into the city, and they walk by its light. How could that be if you just killed them? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you kill your enemy, that's it. They're good and dead, and you don't want to hear from them again. You don't want to resurrect them and bring them into the city.
I think for me, it seems that so many people have been taught by the what's that word, Tony? By the patriarchal male,
Patriarchal world, yeah.
which
Worldview.
is they want to control us.
Yeah.
So they were taught that way. So it's really hard for, like you said, people to understand or to accept this new way of thinking. It's more of true opening up to want to know what the true Holy Spirit is trying to tell us.
Yeah, the seven spirits are with the Lamb.
Right.
That is the fullness of the Holy Spirit. I mean, seven spirits is the full complement of gifts of the Spirit is with the Lamb.
And that's one thing we can pray for. We can pray that the Holy Spirit can touch other people who have been taught a different way, the violent way, because they really were taught a violent way instead of understanding the love and nonviolent way.
Right.
And that's why these sessions are important for people to start hearing it more often.
Absolutely. And I think there are other people, other outlets teaching this stuff in different ways, not necessarily through Christianity, but they are the voice of nonviolence is rising up and getting stronger in the world. And of course, the figure of Jesus is so supremely nonviolent that it'd be very hard to mistake him as a violent figure. But the Book of Revelation has kind of been interpreted, especially that last battle, in those terms. But I mean, did they read the next chapter? You read the last battle. Do you read the next chapter?
Right.
Well, also the people will still interpret the white horse and the sword.
Yeah, right.
They're not hearing that it was the words that he's saying. He wasn't using the sword killing people.
No, that's right. Dana, what are you going to say?
I was just thinking, I feel like to look at things differently, you have to be in a place of not feeling a threat, I suppose. So it's so hard to break through if someone has been taught the Bible is a safety net. It's a big security for people, their religion.
Right.
So to look at it differently, I think it feels scary and threatening.
Yeah.
So you have an open space to really think about it in a different way. But I think if it wasn't layered, like whoever layered, what was it, Augustus or somebody who you said layered the
Augustine.
His interpretation really messed things up because
he wasn't the only one, but he was pretty forceful. Yeah, pretty crucial. Yeah.
So because we're always dealing with the human, we are violent ourselves, so it's so easy to just take that interpretation.
Yeah.
Shoved down your, taught that way, but it just really doesn't make any sense if you do it at the same time. I guess I'm just saying, I don't mean to ramble, but I think if people are in an open place, it's really obvious what you're saying, the true interpretation, in my opinion. But I think that's a problem with human nature.
Right, it is. All you could do is keep trying to show people and pray, like you say, and others say, that they get to that other place. I mean, because when you are in another place, you can begin to listen to think of another interpretation. You have to get to that other place where you say, well, I need to hear this differently from what I heard before.
I would not, when I was younger, I did not read the Bible by myself because of the way I heard people talking about scripture. So for a very, very long time, until I went to that Bible study you had at that Methodist church, I didn't trust the Bible. The Holy Spirit was talking to me in a different tone, of a love, peaceful tone, but the Bible was being presented as a violent, angry God, and it didn't ring true to me. But now it rings true to me that God isn't violent. And it's okay to read the Bible, but you have to read it in the different light of Jesus.
Right, yeah. And the Lamb. Jesus
Right.
as the Lamb, yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you so much for your attention. And, you know, this is not the end of the story. As Jerry says, at the end of the book, it says you have to wait a little bit longer. So it's not the end of the story. We have to keep going. And keep hoping and praying. But I thank you that we did this journey together and we have completed it. So a big round of applause to everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you especially Tony. Bye now.
God bless you all. Love you all, and all those who are listening to us on YouTube. Peace to everyone.
Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome, and have a good day.
You as well.
Bye.
Bye.